Imagine you're a soldier in ancient Jerusalem. You've just received the most disturbing order of your entire military career. Your queen, a woman who should be mourning the death of her son, has just commanded you to go through the palace and kill children. Not enemy children. Not peasant children. Royal children. Princes. Heirs to the throne. Her own grandchildren. You walk through those palace halls. You see their mothers screaming, begging, trying to hide them. And your queen has ordered you to kill them all. This isn't fiction. This actually happened. And it was orchestrated by the only woman who ever ruled as queen over Judah, a woman whose story is so dark, so twisted, and so dramatic that most people have never heard it. Her name was Athaliah. And what happened next is one of the most incredible stories of survival, courage, and divine intervention in the entire Bible. Let me tell you how one of the most evil women in biblical history almost destroyed the entire lineage of King David, and how one brave woman with a hidden baby stopped her. To understand how someone could do something this unthinkable, we need to go back to Athaliah's childhood. Because she wasn't just anyone, she was royalty. And not just any royalty. She was the daughter of the most infamous power couple in biblical history, King Ahab and Queen Jezebel. Ahab is called the most evil king Israel ever had. And Jezebel, she's become synonymous with manipulation, murder, and wickedness. Here's what kind of woman Jezebel was. When her husband wanted a vineyard but the owner wouldn't sell, Jezebel didn't just negotiate harder. She didn't just offer more money. She forged letters in the king's name, arranged for false witnesses to accuse the man of blasphemy, had him stoned to death, and then told her husband, "Go ahead, take the vineyard. The owner's dead." That's who raised Athaliah. Jezebel was also a zealot for Baal worship. She hunted down prophets of the God of Israel and had them executed. She turned Israel's religion upside down. She had no boundaries, no conscience, no line she wouldn't cross. And little Athaliah watched all of this. She learned at her mother's knee that power is everything. That murder is just a tool. That the ends justify any means. That gods can be bought, manipulated, and used for your own purposes. When Athaliah came of age, she was married off to Jehoram, the crown prince of Judah, in what was supposed to be a brilliant political move, an alliance between the northern kingdom of Israel and the southern kingdom of Judah. The two kingdoms had been divided and often at war for decades. This marriage was supposed to bring peace and unity. But what it actually did was export the corruption of Ahab and Jezebel's house into Judah. Athaliah didn't just become queen of Judah, she became a missionary for Baal worship. Temples to foreign gods started appearing in Jerusalem, the holy city of the God of Israel. The temple of the Lord was neglected. The priests were marginalized. When her husband Jehoram died after a terrible illness, their son Ahaziah took the throne. He was only 22 years old, and the Bible tells us his mother was his counselor. In other words, Athaliah was the power behind the throne, whispering in her son's ear, guiding his decisions. But Ahaziah's reign was short. After just 1 year, he made a fatal mistake. He allied himself with his uncle, the king of Israel, and got caught up in a violent revolution. A military commander named Jehu had had enough of the house of Ahab. God had anointed him to wipe them out completely, to end the dynasty of Ahab and Jezebel once and for all. And Jehu was thorough. He killed the king of Israel. He had Jezebel thrown from a window, where she was trampled by horses and eaten by dogs, exactly as the prophet Elijah had predicted. He hunted down and killed all 70 of Ahab's sons in one bloody day. And he killed Athaliah's son, King Ahaziah. Now, put yourself in Athaliah's position. Your mother has been murdered. Your brothers are dead. Your nephew, the king of Israel, is dead. And now your son, the king of Judah, is dead. Your entire family has been systematically eliminated. Most people would be devastated. Most people would be traumatized, grieving, broken. But Athaliah was her mother's daughter, and she saw an opportunity. With her son dead, the throne of Judah was technically vacant. According to law and tradition, it should pass to one of Ahaziah's sons, the next generation. Athaliah had grandsons who were the rightful heirs. But Athaliah didn't want to be queen mother, bowing to a child on the throne. She wanted to be on the throne. She wanted the power herself. So she made a decision that would shock even the most hardened palace officials. She ordered the execution of every single member of the royal family. Every prince. Every potential heir. Every grandchild. This wasn't just murder. This wasn't just a political purge. This was infanticide. This was genocide of her own bloodline. This was a grandmother massacring her own descendants. These weren't just any royal children. This was the line of David, the dynasty that God himself had chosen and promised would endure forever. God had made a covenant with David that his descendants would always sit on the throne of Judah. Athaliah's massacre wasn't just attacking her family. She was attacking God's promise itself. Whether she knew it or not, she was trying to make it impossible for God to keep his word. She was trying to erase the line that would lead to the Savior. For 6 years, she ruled. She promoted Baal worship, stripped the temple of the Lord to decorate pagan altars, and sat on the throne of David thinking she had won completely. But she didn't know about the baby hidden in the bedroom. When the order came to kill the royal children, when soldiers were going room to room through the palace, when chaos and screaming filled the halls, Jehosheba refused to let it happen. She was Athaliah's stepdaughter, and she was married to Jehoiada, the high priest. She had access to the royal nursery. And when she saw what was happening, she acted. She grabbed one of the baby princes, a 1-year-old named Josh, along with his nurse, and she hid them in a bedroom. Somehow, miraculously, they weren't discovered. And then she did something even bolder. She smuggled that baby out of the palace and took him to the last place Athaliah would ever look, the temple of the Lord. The queen had made it clear she had no use for the God of Israel. She was too busy worshipping Baal. So the temple became the perfect hiding place. For 6 long years, Prince Josh lived in secret in the house of God. His aunt Jehosheba and his uncle Jehoiada raised him in secret, teaching him about the God of Israel, about his true identity, about the legacy he carried, the blood of David flowing in his veins. Meanwhile, outside those temple walls, Athaliah ruled. She threw banquets. She made decrees. She built altars to Baal. She thought she had successfully ended the dynasty of David. She thought the throne was hers forever. But in the temple, in the very house of God she despised, hope was growing. Hope was learning to walk. Hope was learning to read. Hope was learning who he really was. When Josh turned 7 years old, Jehoiada decided the time had come. The boy was old enough to be presented. God's promise needed to be restored. But this was incredibly dangerous. Athaliah had guards. She had power. She had eliminated everyone who stood in her way before. What would stop her from doing it again? Jehoiada had to be smart. He was a priest, not a general. He couldn't just storm the palace with an army. He had to build a coalition quietly, carefully. So he began reaching out, first to the captains of the guard, then to the Levites, then to leaders from towns all over Judah. He brought them to the temple one by one, swore them to secrecy, and showed them something they thought they'd never see again. A living heir of David. They swore an oath. They committed to putting the rightful king back on his throne, no matter the cost. And they made a plan. They chose a Sabbath day, when there would naturally be crowds and activity at the temple to provide cover for what they were about to do. Jehoiada armed the Levites with weapons that had once belonged to King David himself, stored in the temple for generations. He positioned guards at every entrance. He surrounded the young prince with protection. And then, with commanders and witnesses gathered, with the temple packed with people who thought they were just attending Sabbath services, Jehoiada brought out the 7-year-old boy. He placed the crown on his head, the crown that had belonged to his father, his grandfather, all the way back to David himself. He gave him the testimony, the scroll of God's law that every king was supposed to keep and read. He anointed him with oil. And then everyone erupted. Long live the king! Trumpets blared. People clapped and shouted. The sound echoed through Jerusalem. For the first time in 6 years, there was a legitimate king on the throne of Judah. The palace was right next to the temple. And in her throne room, Athaliah heard the noise. Trumpets. Shouting. Celebration. What's going on? She was furious. What kind of an authorized gathering was this? What were those people celebrating at the temple? She rushed over, with her personal guards, expecting to shut down some kind of religious disturbance. And then she saw him, a child wearing a crown, standing by the pillar, in the place where kings stand, surrounded by commanders, trumpeters, singers, and rejoicing people. She tore her robes, and she screamed at the top of her lungs.
Treason! Treason!
Jehoiada gave orders to the commanders, bring her out between the ranks, and if anyone follows her, Kill them with the sword. But he was very clear, do not put her to death in the house of the Lord. Even though Athaliah had defiled so much, even though she'd brought Baal worship into Jerusalem, even though she deserved death, the temple itself would not be stained with her blood. That space was still holy. So they seized her. They took her out through the horse entrance, toward the palace. And there, outside the house of God, justice was done. After 6 years of terror, after the murder of countless innocents, after attempting to destroy the promise of God itself, Athaliah's reign ended. So what do we take from this incredibly dark, dramatic story? First, evil often reproduces itself. Athaliah learned cruelty from Jezebel. Violence and corruption can be inherited, passed down through generations like a terrible legacy. But, and this is important, that cycle can be broken. Second, God's promises are unbreakable, even when they look impossible. For 6 years it seemed like Athaliah had won. The dynasty of David appeared extinct. God's covenant looked void. But God was preserving hope in a hidden place, preparing restoration in secret. Third, never underestimate the power of one person's courage. Jehosheba wasn't a warrior, a prophet, or a queen. She was just a woman who saw evil happening and refused to stand by. She risked everything to save one child. And that one act of courage changed the entire course of history. Fourth, the darkest moments often come right before the dawn. When things look most hopeless, when evil seems to have completely triumphed, that's often when God is about to move. The people of Judah thought the line of David was gone forever. They were wrong. Hope was hiding in the temple, growing stronger every day. And here's the most beautiful part of this story. That 7-year-old boy who was crowned that day? He's a direct ancestor of Jesus Christ. If Athaliah had succeeded, if Jehosheba hadn't acted, if that one baby hadn't survived, the genealogy leading to Jesus would have been cut off. Athaliah tried to make God's promise impossible. But one hidden child survived. One preserved life continued the story. The line of David endured through the darkest chapter imaginable. Athaliah's story reminds us that darkness never gets the final word. Her story is a warning about what happens when power becomes everything, when family means nothing, when murder becomes policy. But it's also a story about courage, about faith, about the fact that even when evil seems to have won completely, God is still working. Hope still survives. Light still exists, even if it's hidden in a secret place. Sometimes all it takes is one brave person, one faithful choice, one hidden child, and everything changes. If this story impacted you, hit that like button and subscribe for more biblical stories that will challenge how you see history, faith, and the world. Drop a comment and let me know. Had you ever heard of Queen Athaliah before? What part of her story hit you the hardest? And remember, even in the darkest moments, even when evil seems unstoppable, hope survives. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.